Member for Burnaby Lougheed.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Um, and thank you to my colleagues. I'm happy to resume my place on this debate. Before we rose for break, I was sharing with the House the history of ALR as I've learned it and the public reception of the legislation at that time in 1972 when the announcement was made. Understandably, the legislation announcement set off a frenzy of rezoning applications by the landowners, hoping to make changes before the legislation went through. The agriculture minister then responded by introducing a farmland freeze order in council, which halted the agricultural land subdivisions immediately. And the new statute created the Provincial Land Commission as well, a 5-person body then tasked with the designating ALR sites around the province. And the commission, as it turns out, they set up their headquarters in a long, narrow office that's in Burnaby, actually. Now, what became apparent in this process was that saving farmland was one thing, but saving the farmers was another. The two needed to go hand in hand for the agricultural viability of this province. So the New Democrats, the government then recognized, more so than the Socreds ever did at that time, that farming was a tough gig. It was a tough gig to be in, especially in terms of its profitability. So while many farmers held profound pride and found joy in their trade, planting seeds, watching them produce, supplying the market with the harvest, the business didn't command sufficient price to make reasonable return on investment of all their work. So unlike other industries, let's look at LNG, for example. With ROI expected at about 15% of the capital, we can't expect that kind of return, that level of return in farming. So it is known to most of us that farming is perennially difficult business economically for any given farmer, especially when Mother Nature throws a curveball at you every now and then with severe frost, just as the apple blooms are opening, or drought, hailstorms, for example. So something had to be done. Something had to be done. If you take from the farmers of their pension plan that depended on the eventual sale or non-agricultural application of their property, you need to give them something else. You need to equip them with a better alternative for more profitable prospects in farming that will allow them to use that surplus towards their retirement plans. And that's essentially exactly what Dave Barrett came up with, which was called the 4 pillars, quote unquote. So that included the Farm Income Assurance Act, the Agriculture Credit Act, Farm Product Industry Act, and the Agricultural Land Development Act. And the Farm Income Assurance Program in particular is what I think is worth for us to spend a bit of time on, because not only was that program precisely the kind of support we should be exploring for our farmers today, but it's just the right way of doing things, period, instead of fracturing a perfectly sound and ever more imperative ALR. The Barrett government wanted a support program for the farmers structured in an effective way, because nobody wants to see another subsidy program that may be rewarding inefficiency. So the way this farmer income assurance program evolved is that the government will guarantee a portion of the cost of production of a particular crop for the farmer. So the cost of production was determined in consultation with the BC Federation of Agriculture officials and market experts based on a rolling average of the production volume. So for example, if it is determined that the average industry cost of production is, let's say, 10 cents per pound of apples, and the farm typically produces 100,000 pounds annually on average, then what we can do is it'll be 10 cents times 100,000 pounds. That'll work out to be about $10,000 that'll be assumed as the general cost of production. So assuring a part of that, say about 2/3 of that cost, which will be about $6,700 that the farmer can count on from the government if the weather events yielded worse returns that year, leaving the farmer without a profit for the year and his investment for the year lost. Having that $6,700 meant a lot for these farmers. It gave them confidence. So the program wasn't necessarily providing income for the farmer, so to speak, but rather it provided assurance that the natural risks of this farming business will be covered for. And so for the first time in BC history, the farmers knew they wouldn't go broke in a bad year, that they will have some costs recouped for capital to try again next year. So what this program did was give the farming community the confidence that didn't exist previously. And that single stipulation invigorated the agricultural industry in the Okanagan Valley and beyond. And the climatologist that I interviewed last week, actually, who grew up in a family farm, he jogged his memory during this particular period in the 70s with this assurance program that was in place. He told me, and I quote, "The farmers were investing in their trade. They were buying new tractors and planting more crops creatively because they felt so confident about the risks being moderated for them by the government that they wouldn't be hung out to dry on bad years. Farmers could count on a good return, and that improved their finances. That in return allows them to build their retirement plans without always looking to the potential sale of their land as the only possible exit strategy." So the cost to the Treasury to run this particular assurance program was trivially small because it only had to kick in when the returns to the farmer for that year fell below the cost of production. And that didn't happen every year. The weather wasn't bad every year. So what it did mean, in addition to the confidence element, was that it actually also encouraged the farmers for efficiency. And I think we have a lot of appreciation for efficiency in this chamber these days. So since the cost of production was based on industry average, if you were able to produce the same volume but with less cost by increasing efficiency of your farm, it meant that you can get in a bad year from this assurance program more than what you actually spent. So with the Farm Income Assurance Program, the Barrett government not only made it financially feasible for farmers to continue their services through the good times, through the bad times, it also effectively incentivized efficiency. And at the same time, it allowed the farmers to support the ALR that they were initially against, because everybody saw the value in ALR being put in place for the kind of discipline that we all needed to preserve our farmlands. So as a result, as we all know, the legislations quickly became not only accepted, but it earned widespread popularity among British Columbians and the farmers themselves. And to this day, for 4 decades, it is rightfully considered to be the most progressive and visionary policies of its kind in North America that many other jurisdictions modeled after. But as life would have it, when the Socreds came back in power within a few years, they did start to chew away from the income assurance program because ideologically they saw it as a subsidy program, which it really clearly wasn't. So despite the fact that the purpose of the program was to provide assurance so that the farmers can continue farming through the tough climate and the fluctuating market conditions, eventually, over successive series of legislation, this program was killed. This sent farmers right back to that same hole of insecurity, forcing them to reconsider all options outside of farming to make living, to plan for retirement, be it working, finding another job, repurposing use of their farm, or seeking subdivision and rezoning, which they couldn't with the ALR in place. So they've been kept this way without much of a choice for the past 20 years. And that, Honorable Chair, I think the hardships that the farmers continue to face since then are not because of ALR, but they're because of short-sighted and what I think is just plain bad decisions by the Socreds then, and I feel as though that we're about to see another one being made right here with this Bill 24. So when I hear the members opposite, and I try my best to be respectful and to really listen and see it from the other side, but when they say that Bill 24 supports farmers, I disagree. I can't help but disagree. I disagree not because of the emails and the phone calls and the letters and utter opposition to the bill that I get. I disagree not because I'm sitting on this side of the house. I disagree because I've actually combed through. I haven't slept in the last week because I got so fired up about learning the history of how this came to be, and I wanted to see it for myself. When I combed through the historical accounts, saw the programs that were in place, why ALR came to be, and the science and the ethics that all of this was based on, I just have no other logical choice but to side with the public and the subject matter experts on this particular matter and asking this government how on earth is corroding ALR the right way to support farmers. This is not right. In fact, I think what's more disheartening and disenchanting, and I'm pretty disenchanted already after a year in politics, but what's actually even insulting, I think, is that the government uses farmers as their excuse when you should just say it like it is. This is not about supporting the farmers. This is just really about opening the doors to chew away on our reserve for money, for profit. It's about bottom dollars in the end, and you want that now. I think that's what it really comes down to. So if this government is truly about farmland, if it's about farmland preservation, if this government truly supports farmers, this is not only the worst way of showing that, but I think it's just plain wrong. And I mean that with a lot of respect. And I think the members opposite have to know, they must know that this is the case. They're looking at the same facts, same history. But I also understand that politics is not evidence-based decision-making, but it's decision-based evidence-making. So I get it, I understand. So now we have the government who's set on ramming through with this bill against the public despite the evidence, regardless of many better options that I think the government can really champion. So where do we go from here? As an opposition MLA in the House, I feel just as defeated as many British Columbians whose voices are falling on deaf ears in this government. But that's a little too depressing, so let's talk about all the better things that I think we could focus on, that I think we should work on. Because in fact, that despite having one of Canada's most promising agricultural potential, the government provides the least amount, and that's the least amount of support for this industry out of any other provinces in Canada. So as disappointing as that sounds, the flip side is that there's many great strides to be made. So one of the things, of course, the members all heard it, the government eliminated the Buy BC program in 2001. I understand that it was a hugely successful marketing initiative that was championed by, in partnership with farmers, the grocery stores, the consumers throughout BC. The program managed to resurface in 2005 with funding that are coming from really just from the companies, at which point the government left it entirely to the industry to carry the cost of the program. And there is now a remnant of this program renamed. And I think that's the angle that we can continue to put more resources into. The 25% funding cut in the Ministry of Agriculture in 2005 left the ALR Commission with not a whole lot of resources to respond to the growing incompliance problems, like the fill dumping on the prime farmland, the case that we saw with tons of construction materials trashed in the Babes Honey Farm in Saanich. That's another area that I think this government needs to take seriously. And of course, because large agribusiness and the government subsidies to the industrial food system, it is often very difficult for our local farmers to compete in the market with their price points. And knowing that 95% of what BC eats, what we eat, are imported, when we can grow all of that right here in BC, that's $25 billion that are leaving this province, and why can't we work towards bringing some of that money back right here and putting it into the hands of our local farmers? It turns out that ALC also used to have an acquisition and leaseback program for young farmers to encourage young farmers to get engaged in the trade. It's a 20-year leases with option to purchase after 3 years. It was a very successful program, but that too didn't survive long. It was scrapped in 1976, the first year the Socreds came back in power. So while I appreciate all the little programs that the government puts forth, because everything does help, I think, but at the end of the day, I think these piecemeal efforts that we've been seeing in the last decade we really need to do more than that. I think we're past the point of do more because we want to do more. I think we're also past the point that we need to do more because we have no other choice. We have no other choice at this point. There's alarming signals, and industry is raising flags everywhere. And I think we really need to start paying attention to those things. And I feel as though Bill 24 is not taking us in that direction. If anything, it's taking us backwards. So an average BC farmer is 56 years old. Young farmers cannot afford to take over their farms. BC is growing less than half of its own food needs. And we've heard of the extreme weather conditions and climate change forecasts. And all of those point towards our supporting of the local agriculture here more imperative now than ever. So yes, I agree, we can update and modernize ALR, but Bill 24, I think, does it in a very negative way. Positive changes that we need to see are more definitive, real measures, some of which the government is already taking on, but we need to do more in that direction. And also, we need to stop pinning farmers as an excuse to open more doors to rob land out of reserve. I think that's the ultimate, the last straw there for me, is that the farmers are speaking out against this bill, yet the government continues to talk about the fact that this is how they're supporting the farmers. I can't make that logic work. So we are talking about our land, our food security here. Something as incredibly important as this, I think every citizen of this province owns a piece of this. And they have the right to be informed, and they have the right to be consulted. So another thing to add is the fact that this bill was crafted out of what feels like a special interest is just heartbreaking. Hardworking farm families deserve to make a decent living again. And reconsidering the assurance program that was in place, reconsidering the lease buyback program from young farmers, reconsidering more resources into Buy BC program. Those are all the things that I think we should be doing. And the ALC, of course, requires adequate support to continue conducting sound research, make evidence-based decisions, and to be able to do that independently in good faith for the public. So, despite its warts over the decades, the BC Agricultural Land Preservation Program remains the most successful program of its kind in North America. And here in BC, I don't think it's unlikely we would still have the commercial agriculture culture in places like Richmond, in Delta, in the lower Fraser Valley, and parts of Okanagan if we didn't have the ALR. So it's important to remember that ALR was intended as a permanent zone, not subject to rezoning, not subject to rationing exercise, not a zone of convenience, but this is a cause above all special interest. British Columbia's ALR system has weathered various challenges, as we know, and reorganizations over the more than 30 years of its existence, and there's no doubt that it will have to continue to evolve as the administrations grapple with this challenge of preserving farmland for future generations. We do need to meet the needs of the land and the current inhabitants and the owners. But all of those changes that need to be made, all the adaptations that we need to make, I believe that the Commission as it stands right now have the capacity to remedy the deficiencies and make that decision based on the available biophysical data and fine-tune ALR boundaries accordingly. And we can always fine-tune and improve this particular data and the inventory and our mapping. But that'll take resources, that'll come at cost, and those are the kind of investments that I think the government needs to make. So when British Columbians have been asked whether they support protecting the agricultural values and land for security, 95% said yes. More so, we are seeing a growing number of groups and individuals that are catching on to the severity of this bill, and they're speaking out more, they're organizing, and they're calling out to the government to get their voice heard. My staff just told me during the lunch break that we had 3 new emails just coming to this, coming on this particular issue. So the questions are clear, I think. Is this bill serving our farmers or our landlords? is this bill protecting food security for our society, or is it for short-term profitability for special interest? I think I really tried to go beyond my briefing notes and listened and consulted with market analysts to climatologists. I've talked with farmers.
Thank you, member.
Thank you, thank you. I'll just finish with that. I urge the government to listen to the British Columbians and reconsider this bill. Thank you.